Welcome to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition press conference for October 20th, 2023. Welcome. Let me start by introducing my panel. From my right, there is none other than the leader of the People's National Congress Reform and the Opposition, Mr. Aubrey C. Norton, Member of Parliament, and to his right, none other than Mr. Elson Lowe, economist. Welcome. Today's press statement will be read by the Leader of the Opposition.
Good morning. Jagdeo seeks to deceive the Guyanese public on the question of the registration of Venezuelans. Let us reiterate our position that we support the government in protecting our sovereignty and territorial integrity. However, we believe they are sleeping at the wheel and must be kept under constant pressure to ensure our national interest is promoted and protected. It is important to note how deceitful and dishonest Barra Jagdeo is. In our last press conference, the opposition alluded to the present state of affairs as it relates to the registration of Venezuelans in Guyana. In responding, the second vice president used statistics from 2022, thus seeking to browbeat the nation by saying it was up to 1st January 2023. The fact is, he used last year's information. We need to know the present state of the registration of Venezuelans in Guyana. The VP must put in the public domain how many Venezuelans have been registered in 2023. How many of them are children of Guyanese? How many of them are Venezuelans with no parental linkage to Guyana? He must tell the people of Guyana how many Venezuelans were refused entry for fear they are Venezuelan agents. The government must tell the nation from its registration of Venezuelan refugee how many Venezuelan refugees are in Guyana. As opposition leader, I will be asking the set questions in the National Assembly. The 214 million audit scandal. Jagdeo's tales getting from bad to worse. It is important that the Guyanese people focus on the critical fact of the audit scandal and ignore the pathetic attempts by Jagdeo to muddy the waters. At his press conference yesterday, he unveiled his most blatant attempt yet at bluff and deception by claiming that he and the PPP government had consistently maintained that the Exxon audit should be closed at 214 million and had been holding that position over the last 6 months. To quote what he said yesterday, I quote, "The fact is our position remains consistent from the beginning, and it remains until today. That is where the audit will be closed at. I have said that from the beginning. 6 months ago, I said this. Even before this controversy erupted, I said that. This is totally untrue." Does Jagdeo believe the people of Guyana are dumb or suffer from memory loss? It is he who started the controversy by announcing at his 24th August press conference that the US 214 million in disputed costs had been reduced to 11 million since Exxon had submitted additional documentation in support of the expenditure. That is what Jagdeo said. It is Jagdeo who a few weeks later admitted that he sat in a meeting with Minister Vikram Bharat where his staff reported that US 11 million figure had come down to US 3 million. Guyana must know that this man is not only incompetent and a failed leader, he is dishonest. Little wonder he is accused of fraud and bribery in the Vice News documentary. The undeniable fact is that Barra Jagdeo and Minister Bharat were actively engaged in selling our national patrimony, even though the GRA had written the minister since August 8th, advising that it was offering a no objection to the key finding that there exists 214 million US dollars in questionable expenses. For Jagdeo, therefore, to claim that over the last 6 months, his and the PPP's position has always been in line with the GRA recommendation is sheer fiction, a total fantasy. Jagdeo cannot and must not be trusted. The more Jagdeo speaks about the audit scandal, the more he exposes his dirty hands and guilt. None of his diversions and deception has worked. There is no escape route for him in this crime against this nation. We repeat our call for him to be stripped of all responsibilities for foreign investment and for the oil sector. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I'll open the floor for questions on the press statement, of course, by the show of hands. Mr. Adam Harris.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Carolina, you spoke about the registration of Venezuelans. Now, sometime earlier, you said that you had information that Venezuelans, and you didn't say whether they were of Guyanese parentage or anything. I got the impression when you talk about Venezuelans being issued Guyanese birth certificate, and that allowed them to be registered as Guyanese. Sir, did your preliminary investigation allow you to get a number? How many such cases were there?
We cannot give you a number. We know at least in a number of cases, we had our scrutineers object to the registration. In that case, as I understand it, the registration will go to the Elections Commission. We have informed our commissioners of those that were identified, and they are expected to take it up at the level of the commission. But what I'm saying here is that the government has at its disposal the data. If they're interested in transparency, accountability, and giving the Guyanese the facts, then they can put that information in the public domain and remove all doubts.
Follow up, sir. And I don't want to put anybody in trouble. I'm sure that the party has people inside the, they call it the registration, what the hell is the name? You know what I'm talking about, GPO building. Who would recognize that this registration is going on? Who, first of all, is initiating the registration at the GPO? Is it Cummings or somebody out in the field do it and send it on to Cummings?
What we know, first of all, is that Cummings is a political appointee and not a public servant. And we are aware, we've had cases in the Rupununi and the Northwest, if I recall, where people were given birth certificates, and when they turn up to register, our scrutineers objected. And like I said, that information has been passed to our commissioners, and we will have them deal with the issue. As it relates to if we have somebody in the office there, my answer is no. I don't know of anybody we have in the office. And anyhow, if you know how the PPP operates, it goes from political activists to Cummings and Cummings to political activists. So even if there's a public servant there who hasn't been appointed by the PPP and is a objective public servant who wants to deal with the rules, it will pass nowhere close to them.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions?
Nobody else. Yet let me deal with the scandal, the audit.
Okay.
Now, you said on August 24th, Jagdeo was on record as stating that the figure had been reduced to $3 million.
To 11 million.
To $11 million. And this was a positive statement that it had been reduced. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, it was.
And now you're telling me that yesterday, you go back and you say, for 6 months, they had held the position that the figure was $214 million. Do you decide to approach, I don't know if you're going to approach him, which is not too good a thing to do at this stage, it can be nothing. But will you go out there and put this information to the Minister Vikram and say, look, this happened, what is the true position?
Well, as we stated in the press statement, on the 24th, he said it was 11 million. It is he who then came after and said that Vikram and company advised him that it is down to 3 million. What that indicates is that he was lying when he said they consistently said it was 214 million US and the matter was closed. I recall looking at videos with Barra Jack Deo going on and talking about documentation provided. I don't know it would make much sense to ask Vikram Bharat anything. You would have recognized that they tried to throw it in the lap of Gosai, when in fact Barrett himself had said that on the 24th, and after said it went down to 3 million. And like I'd said before, the law is clear, the minister has responsibility and he must account. But it is totally untrue to say that for the last 6 months or however months Barrett talked about, they were consistently saying it was closed at 214. That is untrue. It is Barra Jagdeo himself who was talking, and only when he is caught lying, he sought to push it to Vikram Bharat, and then Vikram Bharat pushes it to Gosai, and they try to make Gosai the scapegoat, but the evidence is there.
Adam, just to follow up on that, we cannot allow Jagdeo and the minister to try and walk back their statements and escape some level of accountability on this issue. Because even as we have previously said, even in the best case scenario, they asked no questions, they raised no issues, and would have been totally in the dark as to the GRA's position. And that's the best case scenario. Of course, there's also serious questions around corruption here. So we can't allow them to walk back these types of statements now that their pants have been caught down, and now that the Guyanese public is aware that there is some serious concern regarding these audits going forward. It is all too convenient for him to be saying that all along this has been his position, when we've been seeing him come to the nation on more than one occasion to say that this is what is going on, and that there's been some change to the audit amounts. We also want to remind the public that we raised the question of the provision of information, because the auditor had indicated that information was not being provided despite multiple requests. Has the government raised this with the operator? That is a perfect example of something that any normal government would raise and would ask questions about. But it would seem to me that they have no interest in asking any questions, and that to me is terribly concerning.
Thank you. All right, are they?
Yeah, wait, hold on. We got nobody in coming. There is a second audit out. Are you aware of what that is?
Yes, we're aware of that. We're aware of some of the concerns that have been raised. That will have to be reviewed. We haven't engaged in that review yet, but we're aware of some of the initial concerns. I don't know if you had a more specific question.
The question is there a similar confusion over the final audit figure?
There are concerns that have been raised regarding the, or at least let's put it this way, there are disputes that have been raised regarding the figure in that particular audit. The key here is that with this first audit, you've got a process which has been utterly chaotic, and the question is whether it is utterly chaotic by intention. The second audit, while certainly it needs to be reviewed, it's not quite the same. I think some of the concerns will be a little bit different, but that is something that we'll have to review and give the public a good sense of. What we would say, however, is that the correct way for these audits to be approached is with a structured process, with a structured time period in mind. And you've even heard the Vice President himself say that he agrees with the call for there to be some sort of a timeline in place and that the first audit took too long. Now, there's one thing to say something, another thing to do something about what you're saying. There must be structured processes in place. We've outlined that this could be handled by a petroleum commission, but there must be structured processes in place. Otherwise, every audit will be plagued by all sorts of problems and questions of shenanigans. And now the second audit will have to closely scrutinize.
And Adam, it is a government's obligation to ensure it stays on top of these issues, to ensure that they are properly reviewed so that the Guyanese people do not lose. It is evident here that Barra Jack Deo has no interest in protecting the interests of the people of Guyana. And that is why we call for his removal, because if you don't have the interest of the people of Guyana at heart, all of these things will come up. But as we review and arrive at our conclusions, we will inform the media.
Thank you.
Nobody else can come yet? Let me talk about Richard Van Charles's appointment to Venezuela, sir. At the time of his appointment, was he still a member of the People's National Congress Reform? And when did he resign or give up his role of being an advisor to you?
I don't remember exactly when, but he has done that a while back. As far as I know, on the membership roll, his name is still there.
And have you tried to reach out to him to get a comment on his appointment?
No, I didn't.
All right. Thank you. I see the hand of Miss Sambach. I hope I called it correctly.
Hi, good day everyone. Renee Sambach with Kaiser News. I have a question for the opposition leader. Mr. Norton, what is your position and party position on ring fencing of the 6th oil project and the oil projects that come after that one?
We have always said that we believe ring fencing will be to the benefit of the Guyanese people. We have also said that while generally we agree with ring fencing, we should look at every specific activity and decide whether ring fencing is in our best interest. So our position has always been that ring fencing is useful, and we will look at every case and determine as a government what is ring fenced, when and how.
Just to build on that, you'll of course heard us mention on several occasions that we believe that the government should look at spacing out, and that while in office we will look at spacing out new developments, as that can provide one of the particular benefits of ring fencing, which is an earlier, higher revenue stream. But what we want to stress is that there needs to be studies done regarding all of these developments so that the government can manage effectively, whether that is through ring fencing, whether that is through spacing out developments. This process of approving new developments. Right now, we've got a government that just says whatever is at the top of their head, does not provide access to studies or any point to any studies regarding these issues. And therefore, there is no way to tell, or at least it would seem that it's unlikely that Guyanese are getting the full benefit from the oil industry that they would get if there were studies in place and if there were appropriate personnel that are regularly carrying out that type of assessment for the government. We believe that the oil industry must be managed more thoroughly than this in order for Guyanese to get the best benefits.
I also note from observing some of the commentators on the side of the government that they seem to be suggesting that we will get this money anyhow, so why fight? I think it's a bad position to take. we as a country need that money as early as is possible, because it will be invested, and if you invest it early, it will cost you less than when you invest it, say, 10 or 15 years from now, apart from the fact that it will contribute to the development of our people, the development of infrastructure. So I think the assumption that is used by the government is really a questionable assumption. And again, it does not reflect the interests of the people of Guyana. We have regularly said that Exxon has its entitlement, it has its own interest to protect, but we have our interest to protect. And that interest is ensuring the people of Guyana benefit, and that the resources from oil go to the people of Guyana. In that regard, we think the government's assumption about ring fencing is wrong. While we accept that there might be a case down the line where ring fencing can constitute a negative, generally we do believe that ring fencing is positive, and we'll be in a better position if we get the money from ring fencing now.
I have a follow-up question. Suriname and other oil-producing nations have already ring-fenced their project. Do you think Guyana should move in that direction swiftly?
I think I've just answered that by saying generally we agree that ring fencing should occur. I said we should look at all the cases. I've identified that generally ring fencing is good, but from our thinking and our looking at documentation, etc., there might be individual cases where one has to be cautious. I wouldn't go making any absolute statement at this stage.
Thank you.
I would like to follow up. You mentioned, can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Mr. Darky, you mentioned that you're not sure if you have to see a study first before you fully support ring fencing. Is that what you said?
I can't recall saying that.
You mentioned a study that you need to study before you make full commitment.
Could I repeat what I said? I said
Sure, go ahead.
we believe generally ring fencing is good, it has positives. We also said that there might be specific cases that we need to look at to identify the specificities, and there might be a case like that where there might be no need for ring fencing, or it doesn't serve the our interests at that time. And in essence, that is our position. Ring fencing has positives. I also proceeded to say that we believe the government is using some wrong assumptions. And one of the things they are saying is that you will get the money anyhow later down. In response to that, what I suggested is that Guyana needs its money now. And what we need to do in terms of ring fencing to get that, we agree with. And that when you get the money now, prices will be cheaper than, say, 15 years. And the investment you make will be just that investment and improve qualitatively and otherwise. And therefore, we do agree that ring fencing will play a positive role as we seek to develop our oil and gas sector. But that is basically what I said before.
Thank you. Any?
Can I follow up? Mr. Norton, you mentioned positive and negative, but can you name one, you or your advisor, can you name one country that didn't benefit from ring fencing?
Look, I didn't say that there were countries that didn't benefit. I said you're dealing with projects and you need to specifically look at each case. Guyana has its own situation, it has to look at it. We have said that generally ring fencing is good, but that doesn't preclude us from looking. For instance, I've been talking with some persons who said that if it's a small company, then ring fencing could affect it, its involvement, etc. But when it is a multinational corporation that has the capacity to move around figures and information, then it becomes more critical to have ring fencing.
All right, thank you. Mr. Adam Harris?
Can I, one last question? Seeing that we're dealing with ExxonMobil, would you commit Guyana to have those projects ring-fenced?
I don't think I need to answer that. I've already answered that.
It's the same question.
It's the same question. I've said generally we believe in ring fencing. But we also have to look at specific cases. When you are an opposition that is going to be in government, you cannot just make pronouncements, because your pronouncements can come to haunt you when you get government. From the information at our disposal, we believe generally ring fencing is good. As it relates to the specificities, we will deal with that at the correct time.
Thank you. Mr. Adam Harris, you can go ahead.
Yes. So yesterday I was listening to a program and he pointed out an interesting thing. Trinidad in its heyday produced no more than 120,000 barrels per day and became a very rich country. Guyana is producing about 6 times that amount, and it isn't moving anywhere. To what do you attribute the stagnant position in Guyana as opposed to Trinidad's boom when the whole of the Caribbean started to look at Trinidad as a very rich country?
All right. There are a number of factors that I think would have contributed to Guyana not moving in the way that it should. First, there's the governance issue. There is clearly not proper and prudent management of the oil and gas sector. Second, poor allocation of resources. We have consistently pointed out that in the last budget, more than 40% of the budget went to infrastructure, and that infrastructure is unplanned. A lot of times it's really just avenues for corruption, and so it is not part of a structured development plan. And I do believe that corruption plays a significant role in what is happening in Guyana. Additionally, because there was no attempt by the government to put resources into reduction of cost of living and reduction of poverty, the resources aren't meeting the people of Guyana. The government seems hell-bent on giving large contracts, even to cronies like Critic. And in such a circumstance, the focus is not on the development of people. It is on putting resources from the oil and gas sector in the hands of a few. Additionally, as I understand it, even if you're going in the direction of infrastructure, and we think they are wrong in how they are approaching infrastructure, but even if you're going in that direction, the Constitution provides for 25% to go to small businesses, and we see no structured approach to getting small business involved. Don't tell me that giving a crony or something with no experience, etc., is promoting small business. Promoting small business presupposes, one, the small businesses are identified. Two, they are trained. Three, they are supported to ensure that they stay within the rules, etc. And then you facilitate their development. That is not what is happening. The government says last year they're giving 200-something thousand contracts to build roads in Region 6, and they pick up all their supporters, give it to them, and like we've said, while the equipment is moving from the road is moving with the equipment as well. So this high level of incompetence, this high level of corruption, this mismanagement, all of them have contributed to where Guyana is in comparison to where Trinidad was in the 70s and 80s.
Just to build on that, Adam, you asked a good question, when you look at it, it's doubly concerning. Remember, Trinidad has a larger population than Guyana. That's a start. But also, Trinidad, over the course of its entire 100 years or so of producing oil, only produced about 3 billion barrels of oil. We will be extracting, as it stands currently, 11 billion barrels of oil in a far shorter period of time. And so as a result, you would anticipate that we would be able to see, at minimum, people have a standard of living similar to Trinidad, but really it should exceed that substantially. What we've seen in Guyana is the opposite, where we've continued to see a biting cost of living crisis, and we've seen even basic things like GPL and GWI deteriorates. We want to point out to the Guyanese people that the national budget has tripled from 2018 to now, but you're seeing basic things like your electricity and water supply worse off than they were, even while we were seeing production many times higher than it had been in Trinidad at the boom, at the peak. What this says is that not only do you have a crisis of poor governance, you have a government which is vastly underperforming what even any other government in any other Caribbean country would be able to do. Now a government which is committed to performing well, which is what we are committed to, will be able to perform particularly well and deliver to people an improved life. Now this government is in the opposite direction, and it must be highlighted to Guyanese that they're doing pretty much as bad as it is possible for them to do, given the resources available to them and given how much is being spent.
Thank you. Ms. Davina.
Hi, good morning everyone. Sorry about that. I have a quick question for Mr. Norton. So Mr. Jagdeo has said that government is foregoing revenue today by not ring-fencing its projects so that it can earn greater revenues in the future. Given that we are basically acting as a co-financier in these several block projects by foregoing those revenues, can you say if Guyana is benefiting from any sort of returns from that arrangement, based on your knowledge?
I think in my previous presentation, I made it very clear that the government is operating on the wrong assumption. And the assumption is that if you forego it, you will get it a little later. I don't see any significant benefit from that approach. We have a population to feed. We have a country to build, we have infrastructure, social services, etc. to provide, and I do believe that we will benefit if we can get those resources now. I repeat, let's assume I'm building a house. When I build a house today, or I can give you a practical experience, you build a house in 2006 and it costs 36 million. You go to build that same house in 2016, 2023, it will cost you as much as 80 million minimum. What that means is that if I get the money now, I could have built 3 or 4 houses or 2 houses. If I wait for it, the value of the money will go down vis-a-vis the cost of goods, services, etc. And so, for us in the opposition, we believe the assumption made by the government is wrong, and that we should do everything, including ring fencing, to ensure that we get the best now.
I would add, Davina, that it's important again to note that the money that we get earlier will be reinvested, whether it's in education, whether it's in infrastructure, whether it's in healthcare. But really, what is something I think that's flying under the radar a bit is that getting revenues earlier will allow us to diversify the Guyanese economy. What is happening is that the government has thrown its entire, all the eggs are in the basket of oil. And so by not ring fencing and by focusing only on the development of, as the Vice President is saying, more oil resources later, we're neglecting the opportunity for us to diversify this economy. Now, if that is the government's position, that it does not intend to diversify Guyana's economy, they have to come out and say that. But that is the effect of not making use of revenues at an early stage and investing those revenues. It's not to say that the revenues are being lit on fire, but rather that they're being put to good use to improve the Guyanese economy's competitiveness and to improve our production across the board. Even when we invest in education, it is not just because we like education, even though education is valuable in its own right, but to help Guyanese to build skills so that we can expand our services sector, so that we can add sophistication to the Guyanese economy, so that we can make the Guyanese economy more productive. That is the focus, that is the goal of getting revenues earlier. And so if the government believes that we can just focus solely on oil, let them come out and say that.
Probably the government understands that over the years, it has not only underperformed, it showed its incompetence. If you look at Skeldon, you would have seen that they invested money that were wasted. If you look at the fiber optic cable, they have invested money that are wasted. So Barrett must be afraid that this incompetence and the PPP incompetence, if they get it now, they will waste it. So they'll probably opt for just enough to satisfy corruption.
Thank you.
Hi, I don't think my question was answered. What I was asking, and perhaps please allow me to rephrase, I was asking if the opposition or you, Mr. Norton, are you aware or do you know if, as a co-investor, by foregoing our revenues, us using up those profits to invest in the Stabber Block projects, whether we are being paid or receiving any returns on that? That's what I was asking.
I am not so sure what you're talking about, what investment. I don't know the government has indicated that they did any investment. What we are suggesting is that the best thing for the Guyanese people, it is for us to have the revenue, use it to diversify our economy, use it to provide the services, etc., and to ensure that we prepare a better economy for Guyana so that in the future when oil goes, we are not running helter-skelter to try and develop an economy, because oil is not going to last forever. And we need to have that money invested in diversifying our production. Look, something as simple as linking the regions, opening lands in the interior for housing, for business, something as important as giving quality water to our people. All of those things need to be done. I don't know where they would have invested, what they would have invested. I don't want to comment on that. What I do know, if we do investment in the people of Guyana, now we will be better in the future.
Just to follow up, sir, you basically stated your support for government to move in the direction of ring fencing, but is this something that you would do as president if elected? Is this the direction that you would move into, ring fence, let's say, a big project or any audit to be approved in the Stabber Block?
I have answered that question before, and I repeat, we believe ring fencing has a positive role to play. I do not want, or I have been around long enough to know everybody that speaks has his or her own interests. And when people are seeking to get you to make absolute statements, they are seeking to box you in for the future. We are a government in waiting, and we will get to the head of the government. We will look at the situation, and then we will make those decisions. I do not believe it is useful to do like Barra Jack Dio said, we'll renegotiate, we'll do this. That's political opportunism. What we need is a principled approach. We need to study all that we need to do, and then to implement. We understand that newspapers have to sell, but we do not believe we should contribute sensational statements that will sell probably newspaper, but will not necessarily be in the interest of Guyana and Guyanese. And therefore, we will be very measured in our comments. We have general policy positions. We have just outlined it to you. Generally, we believe in ring fencing. As we have to deal with the specificities, we will deal with them and move forward.
Thank you. At this time, I'll take probably one other question before we wrap up, since we're sharply approaching the time to close. Any other questions? All right, with no other hands being raised, I do believe this will bring us to the end of today's press conference. I want to thank the media personnel that joined today for joining, and of course our viewers on all our social media platforms. Thank you so much, and do have a wonderful weekend.